In Parliament this morning, Sinesine Yongumul MP, Kerenga Kua, asked the State Enterprise Minister about whether there were any plans to legislate changes that would see political interference in SOEs removed. According to Mr. Kua, the continued perceived influence by politicians in the operations of SOEs continued to be a concern.
So can we look at cutting out the involvement of politicians, especially ministers, in the appointment of boards and chief executive officers and the approval of budgetary processes and all these things, so that these state-owned enterprises, companies, are given a lot of autonomy to operate on their own and only report to the state as a shareholder only once a year, as ordinary companies are required to do to their shareholders, so that politicians stay out of it. The appointment of board is done independently by an independent process, and every other thing, including CEOs and all this, are appointed through a very, very independent process. I think only then can you introduce stability, and that will lead to performance by these companies.
Mr. Kua used the reforms in the superannuation sector as one that could be used as a blueprint for possible legislation. According to Mr. Kua, the subsequent positive results experienced within superannuation were what could be achieved in SOEs if they were left to function independently.
These examples are in the superannuation industry. In the year 2000, the government led by Sam McCarran reformed the laws, and very importantly, they cut out the involvement of politicians, ministers, the government, in the appointment of the board and the CEO and the approval of the budgets and finances and all these things. It was completely independent, and no wonder. Nash Fund, Number One Super are examples of extraordinary successes, well beyond our expectations and our dreams. Can he now undertake to this Parliament to initiate a study and process leading to the removal of politicians in the management of these companies? That will also include himself if these reforms are carried through successfully. Thank you.
In response, Minister Duma acknowledged that there was more to be done to improve SOE governance, which the government was committed to achieving.
If we want to really turn those companies around, there need to be less intervention and influence from the political masters of the day, Prime Minister. And we look at the models that are being practiced in other countries, starting with Singapore, where all the state-owned companies that are operating in Singapore have done very, very well. And that is a model that can be looked at later on. But if you go to the existing legislation, Mr. Speaker, in fact, there is less room for political intervention. What we need to do now is all of us have to work and help me actually turn those companies around. And when those companies are turned around, we can then be able to go into proposed public-private partnership where we can invite investors to come in and take up equity. You know, Australia has done it very well.